Avengers Assemble! Today we are looking at the Iron Man 2 3 3/4 inch figures from Hasbro, and this is Whiplash. It's yet another one of those figures that, until kind of recently, was a little tricky to come by. I think he's been reissued lately, and I've seen a lot more of them swinging from the pegs, but for a while it's kind of a rarity to see this guy out there on the shelves. Unfortunately, he's not everything I was hoping he would be when I finally got my hands on him. But let's go and look at him in detail. Get the boring stuff out of the way first. He's got his standard issue stand and his armor cards that are still sealed in my case. But I can just imagine this being awkward because you could bring either the head and arms or the torso or the legs and have them as separate pieces. And I mean, he's just a guy. He doesn't have real armor on, just electronic bits. So I think it'd be kind of awkward. The whips themselves are pretty disappointing. It's got this little handle back here that's actually pretty flimsy and weak, and this big, heavy, thick whip part that has a bendable wire in it so you can get into all kinds of poses, but it's just overall too big and bulky, and it makes him front heavy and just isn't a good piece to have as an accessory. The ironic part is I was looking online at the comic series Whiplash, and he has whips that are probably perfect. And then I realized I had similar ones off of the ground assault drone. You can bring these in. They're not quite as long as the Whiplash whips, and you can't really pose them. There's no wire in these. But I think this kind of sculpt would have been a lot nicer to go with the figure. And I wish they would have reissued him with something more akin to this. Whiplash himself is pretty meh. He looks kind of messy just because his uniform's messy, he's got all the little tattoos and stuff, and it comes off being more of a hodgepodge of stuff rather than actual detail. I don't feel like the head looks like Mickey Rourke at all. It really just looks like some guy. No real character in the face. The hair, they tried to add in some white highlights and it really just looks messy and kind of crummy. He's got his arc reactor here on his chest. You can see he has various tattoos. At this scale, they just kind of become splotches on his skin, though I am glad they're there. There's this whole armor coming across the body. You have tubes down here connecting everything. Around his waist, he has the upper part of his jumpsuit that's burnt off. It's just kind of flapping down in the breeze, which is a nice touch. The pants continue that jumpsuit look. He's got his knee torn out with the bit of electronics on it, down to his boots here. On his arms you can see what kind of begins the whips, these tubes back here running up from his back. The back comes off being really messy to me. It's like they had a certain thickness they need to make those tubes, and they're just too large for the back of this figure. It comes off being really awkward and messy. They run down his arm here, and they cut off right at the wrist where he's got his gloves on. Unfortunately, the way his hands are sculpted, when you put the whip in it, it doesn't even really look like it's an extension of all that. It really looks like it's just something he's holding. Which in the movie, it was part of the suit. It was attached. It really would have been nice if they would have made it more movie accurate, because right now it just kind of looks like an afterthought, honestly. For articulation, he has a ball-jointed head, even though you don't get much up and down because of that hair. There's a very hard plastic hair on there. You have the mid-torso rotation, which still works well even with the hoses on there. Pin socket shoulders can go in and out all the way around. Bend and swivel at the elbow. Rotate at the wrist. He has standard movie leg joints, but with all this stuff around it, they're really hard to get to. You kind of have to be able to see that ball to be able to really rotate the legs with any of the other figures, and here you can't see it and it's really just hard to maneuver. You can, however, rotate the upper leg. You can bend the knee at 2 points. I do like on this side that they use the knee articulation to represent the knee coming through the fabric. And you can bend and rotate him at the ankle. And here I've got him using the drone's whips on the Mark V Iron Man. It looks a lot better than those big clunky things, even if they're not articulated. Unfortunately, both the Whiplash and the ground assault drone were a little tricky to find, at least for a while, so it's not like there was a glut of the drones you could pull these whips off of. For the Whiplash himself, I can't say I'm the biggest fan. It really stinks seeing as with this line in the movie series particularly, we got a lot of Iron Men and very few villains. We have the Ironmonger, and for a while that was pretty much the only one, and even he was a rarity. Whiplash was hard to come by. The drones were hard to come by. And we've still never seen a final battle Whiplash, which is something that I would love to get my hands on because that would be much, much cooler and really what I feel like you need for the collection. The fight scene on the racetrack with this version of Whiplash was a cool scene in the movie. But for display purposes, the figure just comes up lacking and isn't the quality it needs to be. So I'm going to not recommend Whiplash unless you just need a villain for this line. This has been another Outside the Box review, and stay tuned as we continue to count down to Avengers.